this episode of the Outrun Show. Today we are talking about ramping up your training once you've stopped. So let's say you've had an injury or you've just been busy with life. Life gets in the way sometimes, right? Other priorities. You lose focus and maybe you're at a particular level, or you're even sedentary and really very passive about your training, and you just want to get better, you want to grow, and you want to take things to the next level, but you've been stagnant for a while. Maybe a couple months, long enough that maybe you've lost some skills, or you need to take some caution when getting back into things. So how do you guys approach getting back into training? Maybe the first question is, when do you know that you've been sedentary for long enough that you need to take a different approach to getting back into training?
I got a great answer to that one. It's when you get back into training and something that should have been easy for you is like not so easy. Like you're like, oh yeah, I used to hit this jump. This used to be in my like fun little jump that I'd come into the gym and I would hit as like part of my warm up. And then like you go into the gym and you like do a little warm up and then you go for the jump and you like biff it. Not like biff it hard, but you just like, you short it or whatever.
It feels a little bit
or you hit it and you're
reach.
just like stiff and you're like, oh. Because the biggest thing is that you're always going to feel up here that like in your mind that you didn't lose much, right? You consciously know like, oh, I've been stagnant. I haven't been training. So I'm like, yeah, I'll need to like, brush the rust off a little bit. But in your mind, you're always going to be at that level. But your body atrophies very fast. I mean, what is like 2 weeks is like that timeline that if like you haven't used that muscle group in a similar capacity in 2 weeks, you are atrophy. You are now actually losing muscle mass from that. So like if you're like, oh yeah, I haven't jumped in like, a month or so, your quads quite literally aren't the same as they were before. Right. And so like even though in your head you're like, I know I could hit a 9'6" broad jump or whatever, you can't anymore.
Right.
You just don't have that same tissue strength that you used to. So that's the big thing, right? Is like once you notice those discrepancies when you come back, that's when you know like, oh, I've been gone too long.
To be honest, I would even say that sometimes I use that as a measurement of if I am semi-consistently training, use it as a measurement to understand that I'm sick or like not well. Like if I have something coming on, like a bug or something, dare I say that in this era, and I go to jump and I say, oh, the power's not there. It's like kind of your body telling you, hey, there's some kind of disconnect here.
Yeah, for sure. So it's
especially
what are your like big key indicators before you come back to training? I guess you just look at like your past couple of weeks of activity, and if your past couple of weeks of activity, I would say that you've been stagnant if you haven't done any sort of active play or active training in 2 to 4 weeks. Like if that, like most people might consider like a stagnant period as like, oh, all summer I was busy working and that was my thing. But for me, I think depending on your level of athleticism, it could be as short as 2 weeks. Like if you haven't trained in 2 weeks, that's a stagnant period for you, and you need to reset and ramp back up before you start getting back into like the heavy stuff. Obviously, if you're like 13 years old,
your recovery's gonna be
like well, just
a day.
Yeah, you're not gonna atrophy as much when you're that young because your body's constantly growing, and that's the net gain is gonna be higher than what you would lose in atrophy.
Right.
So
also,
a bit of that.
With younger athletes, the adaptation, there's still so much growth going on, but they probably haven't trained them. Like what you were talking about earlier, one of the things that most 13-year-olds don't have 9-foot broad jumps. So a lot of that too is that they haven't trained to a higher level, and so they don't have those expectations. They're not attempting those things because they just have never been there before in many ways. And so one of the aspects of a double-edged sword of getting better is that when you come back in, and I even see this with our athletes when they just unlock one skill in one lesson that took them the entire lesson to get to, and they come back the next lesson a week later without practicing it in between and without doing anything to sort of like deload that level of effort, coming back in and attempting with little to no warm-up to get what they spent an hour working up to, and just because the sort of all systems were in play, they unlocked that skill once, they expect to have it like an achievement in a video game or something where once you unlock it, it's just yours to always call
It's a
on.
skill.
Yeah.
You've unlocked that skill tree now,
Yes.
and you always can access it by pushing these certain keys.
Yes.
Yeah,
It doesn't work that way. The body doesn't work that way.
Sounds great.
It does.
It does sound great, but maybe in the bio future that we have, where the cyberpunk future, Justin,
Yep.
you can have legs that have skill trees.
Yep.
That would be
We
great.
were talking about that though, but having muscle soreness is such a great feeling afterwards. And if you have robo legs,
It's true.
Having muscle soreness is a great feeling.
It is.
so
It really
good,
is.
man. Yeah.
It's like a deep massage, man. It's like a massage. You're like, that feels good. You know that groan you do when you're on the massage table and she's like elbowing like your shoulder, like underneath your shoulder blade.
Those are cries for help. For me, that's a help. Like it's not. Yeah. Wow.
Such
That's
a
it. We
pain.
experience pain differently, I think. But yeah. But no, that's cool. I know the I actually don't like the second or third. I don't like delayed onset DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, and I actually don't like coming down the stairs and feeling like I got quote unquote a workout. I don't like that feeling at all.
You don't like sitting down on the toilet and you're
Dude.
just like, it just
yeah.
hurts so much.
No.
That's great.
Dude,
Oh,
I love that.
goodness.
I love that feeling. Sometimes, like in the mornings, because I'm a regular guy, so it's like I wake up 10 minutes, I'm in the bathroom. Whatever time I wake up, 10 minutes from then, I'm in the bathroom. And sometimes, I just I go to sit on the toilet, and my quads or my hamstrings are just so fried that I go to like a nice 45-degree bend, and I just
Don't fall. Man,
So great.
I didn't think.
and
of
then
that.
I have to because I got a squatty potty, I have to grab my knee,
Yeah.
lift it,
Yeah.
Right.
lift it, and then I'm
So
I'm
now
good
you
for
need.
business. I like that.
I didn't know this was a demand. Now you can on your product research page start working on a spring-loaded receiving toilet
Oh yeah,
seat.
where it sits up.
Right, so that you can load and land. I guarantee you there is a demand for that.
I think
for
it
me,
might resonate with a market that you're not looking for.
for me, the pain of recovery just means that I feel like it's going to take me longer to warm up, to train again, to move again, and then it's not necessarily that the pain itself is unbearable or anything. It's just I'm like, oh man, if I go and train right now, I'm going to have to warm up extra hard, and then get to be into that flow state. You know what I mean? It just feels like that delayed onset muscle soreness feels like it's like waiting in line to get on the ride. I'm like, oh, get energy, recover, come on, all right, let's go. Right, that's how I feel about it, more so than that feedback of. But that's a very cool thing that you guys point out, because I think a lot of people, and you guys are beyond this in maturity for sure, but a lot of people use how much pain they're in as a marker for whether they worked hard enough when they trained, or whether they really got quote unquote got a workout. It's a problem I run into a lot with earlier adult students, where the focus of our programs for adults is really centered around longevity of movement, not necessarily a booty boot camp where you're trying to feel the burn in your booty, right? So it's that's different than what we're doing, and it's a lot of skill work and a lot of neurological work where we're trying to keep the right amount of stimulus for the nervous system. So when people come in early on, they're like, well, I didn't feel like I got a workout. And that's tough, because if your coach does it right, the stimulus might not be noticed to you physically. There won't be pain, especially early on. There's always some acclimation that can occur if you have really atrophied or underused muscles, but really that you shouldn't be experiencing a ton of pain. So let's talk about that real quick. When you come back to a workout, if you experience pain, what is acceptable and what is different? Because the type of pain that you guys are talking about, which comes from just getting potentially a really challenging training session in 2 days prior, which it's natural to invoke some of that inflammatory response, because that's what helps the body signal growth and whatnot, versus, I can't sit down at all, or what's the right kind of pain when you're coming back? Or is there
I feel like if in your own definition you're categorizing it as pain, then I think that's enough. If it's uncomfortable and annoying and debilitating, then it's pain. And if I can't do the things that I want to do, it's pain. But soreness is just like, oh, the things that I want to do make me laugh because they hurt so much. That's like.
But you also have that weird response. Like you get the pain makes you laugh. Like we're wired differently.
It's like when you guys get your blood drawn, like I've noticed that there's three responses. There's people who are just like, because they like
stoic,
channel the stoicism, and then there's people who laugh, and then there's people who cry. I laugh because I'm crying, or I cry because I'm laughing. I'm not really sure, but it like has such just a weird feeling to me that it makes me giggle. Not like some sort of dark magician way. I just like it tickles inside my arm. But I feel like it's like that, right? Like the pain of muscle soreness is like it makes me giddy. But I was gonna say, just like Justin was saying, like it's dependent on you, right? What we do know is that everybody's nervous system is a little bit different, and pain tolerances can vary widely between people. And ultimately, if it hurts you and you would categorize that as pain, that's too much. And it's important to note that when you feel pain, movement patterns change immediately, right? Like your brain is wired to avoid pain. So if you would categorize something as painful, especially like post-workout, and then it's like if your calves are so sore that you can't walk, but you got to go hiking with like, some family and friends, that's a terrible idea. Even though people are like, oh, it's good, it gets some blood flow in the calves. It's a bad idea because your movement patterns that entire hike are different. Because your body's going to be wired, constantly trying to find a new way to move without pain. Yeah. Right? So if you do train that way and you hit that pain point, you need to know that like, that was too much for me. And it's definitely like a self-rating scale. If you sit on the toilet and you're not like, I'm sorry, that hurt. Yeah. And you're like giddy about it and happy, or just like, oh yeah, oh, that was good. And you're like, oh my God, that's too much. It's like I gotta put my hands here and hold myself up when I'm on the toilet, and you're categorizing that as pain, then your past training session was too much.
Yeah, and I think that I can get that feeling of giggling. Like I definitely, when you say like when I think about more as like Goku, then yes, I can definitely enjoy just having like crushed a session. And then a couple days later being like a little bit mangled from it, but that's more like pride of like having gone to battle and endured it, and then I come out and I'm just like, yes, I hurt, but I understand why, But again, it's one of those things where if I were to like, eat something and then feel that way, I would call 911, right? Like it's not it's not like if I went out and like a sandwich gave that to me, then, or if I ate some tacos and I had that feeling, I would be like, wow, let's call poison control or something like that, or maybe that's different. I think it's knowing the intention, which leads me to the other thing that you made me think of when you were talking about that, is just how, like, why are you returning to training, right? So if you have been sedentary for a while and something came up in life that maybe was a distraction from that, was it just that you were just playing too many video games and kind of got lazy, or was it a scenario where you had something happening to you in life that required more focus or attention, right? A life event, and then now you're coming back. You have to also be conscious of what you're doing to your body in response to the reason for returning to training, because there's been plenty of times where I think me returning to training has been like kind of like pseudo like self-abusive, right? Meaning
you're like, oh, I've been off for 2 months and I just need to like smash the lazy out of me from these past 2 months. So you're like trying to stack all of 2 months into this one workout. Is that what
or like there's that would probably be the most benign. But like also like sometimes like I can remember when I had like a girlfriend break up with me or something like that, and I was maybe late teens, early 20s, and I was just like training super hard because I felt like I was angry at the situation, and maybe I felt a little bit like I wasn't good enough deep down. I don't know if I would have admitted that at that point, but I was like, oh man, I'm just gonna crush this workout, and if I hurt, it doesn't matter because this is whatever. And then I just remember pulling muscles and stuff, and just, or even if you would have come out of that with being better, I don't know if that's the right way to go into something. So you have to ask yourself, like, when you're getting
mindset.
back into training, like, what is the mind? Because you can code some messed up stuff in your head, then you go on and train later on in life doing a similar modality, and then you're like, well, I don't have a good relationship with training, I don't like to train, but you don't realize the reason you don't like to train was because you trained yourself out of a tough relationship, or in response to survival from something, like, you know what, like maybe you were training a particular way and that's when you had to go to battle or something. I know I'm drawing from experience I don't have, but now you have some association there. That's reasonable to have some association with that training that is negative. And so you want to make sure that when you train, you're training for the right reasons, you're coming back for the right reasons, and that's to get better or to overcome something. And then that way you don't have those negative associations, because it's more than just like some sort of like subconscious thing. Like, you should be training to get better and to feel better and be happier, not to because you're judging yourself. And I think a lot of people go back into training and they want to feel that pain, are associating that with sort of the price they pay for perceiving themselves as being lazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're.
So I worry about that. So number one, check your reason. Check your reason for coming back or getting into something if you are. Okay? Are you trying to prove something to someone else? Are you trying to prove something to yourself that's negative? Or is there a good reason for you to be training?
Well, and there's a difference too between like using that negative feeling for a positive and saturating in that negative, right? Like if she had broken up with you because you were whatever, right? You had a personality flaw, and then you went and you were like reading books. Didn't we all when we were young? Right?
Right.
And then you were like reading books, and you're like, I'm gonna learn how to be a better person because I was such a crappy person, right? Like that's taking negative feelings and negative feedback and turning it towards a positive. And that could be a good reason if you're like, you know what? Yeah, I was training with some guys and they just outclassed me left and right, and that made me feel bad because these were like people I started with, or maybe even worse, these are people that I started training. You know, like I was experienced and they came to me and now they're outclassing me, and that's a negative feeling. You can use that to a positive to be like, I'm gonna hit it hard. I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna improve, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna match these guys. That's a negative turning towards a positive.
Yeah,
right?
we agree. That's a good way.
But if you're just like, oh, I suck, and I just gotta beat myself up, and if I'm the worst, right? Like that's what you're talking about, right? That's not cool.
It's not cool. It's sick, and I think that's where we see a lot of the self-deprecating behavior that we see sometimes with younger athletes who are really like just beating themselves up over a move, is because their expectations of themselves are coming from a negative positioning, a negative framing in their head, right? You definitely can. You know, if you have a really healthy mindset and you get a little bit challenged, you can spin that really quick to a positive motivation, like you're talking about, to train. But if your foundation, if your psychological foundation is that fragile, and maybe you do or you don't realize it, then your focus needs to be first on building a healthy relationship with training, like the right reasons, which is growth, discovery, happiness, right? And then if that's where you feel like you train 80% of the time you're training for that reason, and you're in touch with that place and you're in your own mindset, then you're good to go. You can use a lot of different motivators that other people might consider to be negative motivators and flip that into something positive. I think that's definitely a Goku mindset. Not to make that reference again, but I feel like that's something, you know, it's a good filter. Would Goku train for that reason, right? It's pretty solid. Like, it's a pretty solid archetype, so I'm down with it. If you're someone, and that's what started, you still have time to sort of adjust your motivations. Don't think just because that's what kicked off your training and that's what got you into it, that you can't adapt and change. So if you are somebody who's listening and you're like, oh wait, you just self-realized, I did want to start training because of this. There are deep and valuable reasons to train, and if you've started, you can just shift your perspective, you know what I mean? Adjust your expectations and adjust your reasons for training. So getting back into things, specifically now that we've kind of talked about so the early warning things is like, your performance isn't what it used to be, right? I would say also when you come back into things, it makes sense to sort of tamp down your level of effort, LOE, right? Your level of effort in how you approach things. A lot of good strength professionals right now are talking about, instead of benchmarking with literal like numbers and metrics, which is good to collect that data over time, but especially when you're getting back into something, you may want to approach like a level of 1 to 10 effort right? When you go in to train or when you go through a session, be like, all right, well, I'm kind of getting back into things, so I'm going to hang out around 50%, you know, and I'm just going to hang out there. And maybe if I feel good about something for a few sessions, I'm going to bump that up to 60, 70%, just to see what the downstream effect of that is on recovery. Because 2 or 3 or 4 days down the road, you might have something soft tissue inflammation-wise start to emerge, and then you're like, oh, it's too late. You know what I mean? Because your muscles are going to maybe able to handle it the first day, and your nervous system and your brain may even be able to fire on that stuff and get your changed muscles, like for the negative changed, back doing what you were doing before. But then your recovery is horrible. So you got to look at what recovery looks like. And oftentimes, I think people feel very binary. They go back, they train, they get a bad negative response to it on the recovery side, and they're like, oh, I can't do that anymore. I can't train this way anymore because I'm too old or I'm too injured or whatever. I can't train that. Cole, I don't know what your chop even means, bro.
Not for you.
Thanks, bro. I thought Colin was bugging me about time, and in his own head, he's beating himself up about recovery. He's like, come on, Cap. Like, he's even chopping the part of his body that has problems.
He's like, you will improve. And on the right side, he's not chopping hard.
He's
like,
chopping his
he's
ankles.
like giving it micro bursts.
He's like, all right, we're gonna.
He's like, he's like, I'm just gonna like, once we're alone, Cap.
Once you're alone, Cap, I'm gonna show you who's boss. All right, yeah, just think about what place you're coming from when you train, Colin. All right, so that's a perfect example. Is like you just need to find the level of effort and be humble enough, and this is where I think some of the humility stuff comes in to be able to be willing to train at that, to be able to train light jumping, to be able to train jumping on a softer surface. You can build that volume back up, and that's what you're trying to get back to that ability to work at that level.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that like you coming back to training, you don't always have to have like an exercise or a focus, right? Like sometimes if you're coming back to it, it's okay to just go to your training spot or your gym and just float for your first couple of sessions. Just be like, you know what, I'm gonna hit some small precisions or small jumps, or I'm gonna lift a couple of weights that I know are super easy for me with like a high rep volume, but they're super light. And I'm going to call it. Like, that's it, right? I'm just going to come in, I'm going to feel it, and then I'm going to leave. That's probably better for you than coming in with a focus, assuming you're the type that doesn't need, like, a rigid program to keep you inspired.
How many people have you actually seen? I want to establish that as a virtue, because how many people have you we all know that's the right thing to do. How many people do you think you've witnessed actually taking that approach? How common is that?
Yeah, it's pretty uncommon. I think the people that do that are the ones that just don't know how to program for themselves, and so they're just like, I don't know what to do, so I end up just floating around. So they do it, but not out of intention, but out of just ignorance.
Just sort of accidentally.
Yeah, they're just
they
like,
didn't go that hard.
I don't really know what to do, and I know that I need to get back into it, so I'm just gonna like do stuff, I guess.
They accidentally did the right thing.
They accidentally did the right thing, which is still better than intentionally doing the wrong thing or accidentally doing the wrong thing. So, it's definitely an uncommon trait.
Yeah,
for sure. But I'm like somebody who needs a rigid program. So I always program my first couple of weeks of a cycle to be, like building in intensity. And then, if it's 6-week cycles, week 3 and 4 tend to be my highest intensities. Or week 3 and week 5 are my highest, with 4 as like a little bit of a deload, right? But I know that about me. If you don't know about that about you, then
that's to be discovered. You should.
That's something to be discovered. I know Justin doesn't program his workouts, or maybe that's changed in past years. But Justin just goes in and he's like, today's a 400 deadlift day. That's just what it is.
This is what it is.
No,
he just summons. He just like spirit bomb summons the energies from the universe.
No, yeah, mine's all effort based.
Yeah, sure. I agree. I'm definitely on level effort. But I do have some like programming. Like I will try and follow a program. But what's different is I'll deviate. Like if I get into my just yesterday I was working on like some stretching with the butterflies on like that butterfly stretch where you put your feet together and then your knees are on the outside, and I was working on opening up that stretch. And I got into my second set, and stuff was feeling really fatigued and really achy and painful. And in the past, I might have been like I'm pushing through it, right? But I was like, nope, the goal is for this stretch not to feel painful and me to have this range of motion, because there's not something to be achieved here. It's not like if my knees touch the ground right now that some like balloons drop and I get an award, right?
Yeah.
The reward is being able to do the movement without that pain. Right, exactly. So when you do, I like the level of effort measure because I'm that way too. But how do you then know you're doing enough or whatever? It's just how you feel that day, because sometimes you go into a session and you don't feel like you can do much, and you get in there and you feel like you can do a lot, because it can go the other direction too. You know what I mean? You're all pumped up, you're training with your buddies, you haven't been doing it for a while, everything feels really good, and your level of effort doesn't feel like it's that bad, but you know you've just done a 2-hour session and you haven't done anything for a month or two prior.
Yeah.
You know that's going to come around and bite you, right? Like your first session shouldn't be a high output 2 hours of training, high impact, right?
Yeah, I'm probably the worst person to answer that. I just
recovery?
always have a cap on my effort. Doesn't matter how good I'm feeling. Maybe I'm just not going to go past 75. I feel like that's the number. I don't know if it's actually what it is or not. But, if something requires me to go that hard and I have to try it multiple times to get it, I'm just not going to do it. But I'm not a very good...
What's garnish that?
Garnish that?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Like what has... like
freaking food in house.
Like why is that sort of like your little like heuristic? Like why is that your little like addition to your style of training? Like where did that come about? Right, in other words, and why is it a characteristic of how you train? Because I see that in you. I see it in you.
There's definitely injuries. I know that injuries and bails happen past that marker pretty easily. And man, I don't know. I think that's just it's just what's that? The warrior versus warrior.
The warrior versus warrior.
Sports gene. Definitely on the warrior side for me.
Yeah.
And so and I just like to stay in a zone where I know I'm safe. And if it does require that much effort, I feel like I have to channel a warrior mindset, and the warrior mindset just feels like it just takes too much out of me. And so if I need to become a warrior to do something at this point in my life, I just don't think it's too worth it, because I've done warrior things in the past and I can kind of just coast on those ones. So
I think it's maybe that you place more value on who you are as not an athlete, maybe as a coach, as a person, as as a husband, as whatever, right? As you as a person than you do as you as an athlete. And that like if you go for a jump and you shatter your legs, that affects who you are as a person, right? That like that prevents you from hanging out with friends and family, and that affects these things. And you're like, I'm not willing to risk that stuff for what is a cool jump, right?
Yeah. I also just think doing things at below 75% is just more enjoyable.
They can be
too
pretty cool.
Like when it doesn't require so much effort, it just feels more fulfilling to me. It's like, I didn't have to try that hard, and I did something cool.
So I like your approach, and as a cat father, that's another role that he has.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah, it is definitely.
He's the cat father.
I can see that.
What are the two names of your cats?
Leviosa, Evie.
And Evie. Okay, good. So for a later time, we'll establish their personas. But I actually am programming right now the way that I do the classes that I'm teaching for adults in that way. They're supposed to work up to a skill. Let's say that we just finished cat leaps. They're supposed to work up to being able to do a good amount of volume of cat leaps at a 70% level of effort, right? And I also understand that that's an arbitrary number, because some people don't. They either have like disconnected or like 100% level of effort, and being able to understand that in yourself isn't self-skill. Knowing what 70% is actually a pretty good skill.
Yep.
And especially if it's a new thing you're working on, then we know. What I hear, I think it might have something to do deeper with just the way you approach things. What's your tattoo? What does it say again?
Oh, even mind.
Even mind.
It's very true.
And so I was gonna say earlier that you're just too cool to go that hard, like the Fonz or something
Dude, that's
like
what
that.
he channels for
But
sure.
that's
like that one.
totally
Channels
what
like
it
for
is.
sure.
I'm like, you don't want a high level effort because you don't want to look like you're trying that hard, even to yourself. So
Yeah, I find it really hard to click with that like screaming and getting a little worked up.
Juji
To get
Mufu
something.
stretching methods, yeah.
Although Juji Mufu's different. His is like more.
It's satirical.
humorous,
It's
yeah.
satirical.
So that
yeah.
one I can relate to that one, but definitely the warrior. I just don't identify as a warrior mindset at all.
I think a lot of athletes take themselves a little bit too seriously on those realms, right? And
This all or
that-
nothing mentality, is that what we're talking about? Like willing to sacrifice anything at any given moment to get what's trying to be done?
I can see that.
Is that what it is?
A
to
little
a degree,
bit,
but it's also like I feel like parkour athletes are, even when they come back from a break, are like one of the few athletes
Often are.
that feel like few athletes in terms of all the realms of like sports and athletics that feel like they always need to be performing at the 90 to 100%.
Yes.
Right? And we know from just the vast amount of historical data of athletes that athletes experience the most amount of growth when they're training in the 60 to 80% range, right? And that's where they go. And then occasionally they test into that 90, 95, 100% range to be like, am I actually growing? That's their data gathering time, right? Is they jump up to those percentages and they're like, yep, I'm growing. Cool. Now I have a new 60 to 80% range, right?
Yeah.
It's easiest with weightlifting because there's a literal number that you
can
work
follow.
with, right?
Right.
And within that, I think your guys' scale of effort or energy or what your readiness, if you will, when you go into a workout is super important, because if you're like, I have a workout that's programmed at 75% today, they go into it and I slept terrible, work is stressing me out, I'm really freaking sore, and maybe like it's just my energy level is low. Those four, if you average those out on a 1 to 10 of each, are probably you're like a 4.5 out of 10. So maybe you're like, you know what, I'm gonna instead of 75, I'm gonna do 65 today, and you're gonna feel it out, right? You can always vary within those ranges. Parkour is definitely harder because what is a 65% broad jump? You could measure your broad jump and do the math, but even then, if it's actually 60, sometimes it doesn't feel like that.
It's so
right?
three-dimensional. It's so contextual.
Oh,
yeah.
You change the elevation, you change the surface, you change the weather, you change the people around you, and that's going to affect your number. It's not always sitting in the exact same place doing the same, back squat in the gym you go to every day. Oh man, it's
with
next time go to
the
gym
same music.
with the same music. It's got to
Yeah,
have that
exactly.
song on, or a song that pumps you up, or what is like, you have that sniffing salts or whatever the heck that people do, right? I want to give three, I think, things that I think about that as we've been having this conversation that I sort of do as assumptions. Now that we're thinking about these assumptions, and lay those out when I'm coming back. One is I'm typically using as a measure of this. I'm typically using my recovery, and this is a tough one because if you have to wait to know the answer. That's what's hard. So when I get back into things, I'm working in like a level of effort that I'm directly listening to my muscles. Like, am I starting to is something starting to spasm? Does something feel really like sometimes my hamstrings, if I'm really sedentary, I come back, they'll get really like a really sharp like pain to them if I start doing a lot of jumps. It feels very tight and like sharp, and I know, okay, that's like them being like, hey, muscle tissue's not ready, right? That kind of thing. I get that, but really I'm looking for how 2-3 days later am I handling recovery, and that helps me understand the level of effort and volume that I can put into things. Two, so I would say if you go to day 3 or 4 and you don't have like severe delayed onset muscle soreness, then you can probably increase your volume a little bit. And I would say as a general rule of thumb is getting back into things, if it's your first week back into things or you have been sedentary first couple weeks, I would say stay at 50% or less level of effort, and I would cut your volume, meaning how often you train. If you normally do a 2-hour session or a 1-hour session, I just cut it in half. I'd cut everything in half for the first week or two, and just see how the body responds. Is there inflammation coming into the joints? Are the muscles able to recover and you're able to go back and do that? Does what you did at 50% now feel like 80% the next time you go in 3 or 4 days in? Then you probably went too hard on that first or second session. All right, so just have some humility and listen and work on establishing that for the initial phase. what level of effort should be measured against for me is how hard it takes for me to get into a flow state, right? So if I'm training and I feel like I'm humming, I think it's a bit cliche, but I think most people know what we're talking about. The idea of effortless training, all right? Meaning I go into it and there's a hum to things, right? You're lifting and it's no longer, you're not thinking about what you have to do afterwards, so make sure you eat beforehand. Because one of my biggest distractions, ironically, when I'm trying to get back into things and I'm just a little lazy, is thinking about tacos afterwards. Like, I'm serious. This may be one of my biggest barriers. Is like, I remember going to a yoga class one time because I was like, well, I'm gonna go back in. This is an off day. I'm just gonna work in. So I'm gonna try some yogs out. And I go in and get into the yoga class, and for some reason, like, tacos pop up in my head, and I am just excruciatingly thinking about tacos. I'm like salivating in there, and like they're like, and then breathe, and I'm just like, tacos.
Dude,
right?
I will eat like literal kilograms of food in a day, and I don't suffer from that problem.
Right.
Like, I eat.
Yeah.
I eat a lot.
Right, but if
I
I
don't
won't.
suffer from
I
that.
won't eat enough. Like, for me, it's eating enough. Like, I have to get those calories in, and sometimes I get excited about a day of training, and I forget to eat, or I just don't eat enough, and then I get to my training session, and I'm get into it, and then all of a sudden I remember I didn't eat enough earlier in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I didn't hit like 1,500 calories before training midday or something like that.
Definitely be times where I'm like, are you kidding me? He's gonna leave right now to get food.
Oh, that's the worst part of like traveling and training with travelers. It's like, you get a group of people that are like, oh yeah, let's go train. And then I'll be like, where's Travis? Travis is here. When was the last time Travis ate? This
Gotta feed you Travis.
Yep.
He hasn't eaten. No, let's do in a couple of hours, because I know we're gonna get to the spot. We're gonna start warming up. Travis is gonna be like, I'm gonna go get some coffee.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna move to a different spot. Then he's gonna text me. He's gonna be like, "Where you guys at?" And I'm gonna be like, "We're here." And he's gonna be like, "Where's that?" And then I'm gonna send him a pin. And then he's gonna meander his way there with his tacos. And then by the time he gets there, we already moved on. It's just a pain. So he's got to eat before he trains.
Yeah, you gotta.
And you got to bring an extra, like a snack pack taco in the backpack.
Yes, and it won't. The like bars and stuff just don't work for me. It's just like
Awful.
a teaser. They're just torture. I don't want any of that. That is not enough for me. So,
But anyways, what was your third? I think you had.
so
one or two.
the second one was what can I operate in where I have that like I was saying, cringy flow state, and if I can get, that's where my goal is. When I get back, is not necessarily to hit what I was hitting before, but to get back in that mindset of training where it's the effortless training.
That's good.
You know what I'm saying? Then the last one is respect the process, and that is that understanding that the fact of the matter is, I, in a global sense, experience the most growth where the vast majority of my time is spent doing work at that 60 to 80% level of effort, and then letting opportunities for like periods of acceleration or growth to occur naturally that are outside of that realm. So maybe I have slip into a comp. Maybe I have a challenge. Sometimes it feels like some of the biggest ones of me have been for an off day where I just felt squirrely. Like a lot of my personal records, my PRs, were done on off days. That was a weekend that was supposed to be super casual around Thanksgiving, where again I'm not worried about eating enough. So then I go into the gym and I think one of my most recent records on lifts was done just when I was spotting my wife Candy. She was doing some training, and I was just sitting behind her just doing a warm up, and then I'd spot her and then just throw some more weight on, and then I just do it again. It was just so casual. Then I get that, and I was like, oh, that was awesome. If I would have come in today and I would have been like, I'm gonna hit my best record, my PR on this, I would have psyched myself out. I don't know if the cortisol would have kicked in or whatever, but it has to be of the moment. And so I just sit and sort of, it's like fishing or hunting or something like that, where I sort of operate at about 60 to 80%, and then I just wait for the right opportunity to sort of emerge and let sort of circumstance sort of drive that. But that's just a philosophical thing for me. But it helps me tamp down my expectations of myself, because I'm like, oh man, I haven't PR'd in a while. I haven't hit something big in a while. I haven't seen obvious growth in a while. And then I tell myself, hey, just wait. You just wait for the right time, and then kill it, because you'll be in the best condition for it.
Yeah, well, because most of what we do as parkour athletes is neurological, right?
Yes.
So you have to be in the right mindset to get that neurological boost. Because the truth is, you can have the most powerful quads, but if your CNS is dead as a doornail, like, you could be like, hey, jump, and then your quads are like, fire,
Yeah.
right? But you're like, wait, no, that was delayed, that was too late, right? And so, yeah, I mean, you gotta, if you want to perform at your best, you can't go out there and be like, today I perform at my best, because it just doesn't work like that. You know, you have to almost wait for it. So I like the idea of like, when you're getting back into it, measure the success of your training by figuring out how you can get back into that state that you perform the best of, right? Like, that's your goal. Your goal isn't to lift the heaviest, to jump the farthest, to run the fastest. Your goal is just, how do I get to that state and stay there as long as I need to for the duration of my training session? And that's my goal. Whether that's 50% or 90% of total effort, that state is what I need to be in, right?
And I think that again, I've been watching Avatar again because it's back on Netflix.
Yep.
And I knew that they were going to put it back on Netflix because they're getting ready to drop a new series.
I feel like this is the first time it's been on Netflix.
Oh, you're right. It might have never been on Netflix.
I don't think it was ever
I
on
think the
Netflix.
actual like movie that we don't speak of was on Netflix, but we're not talking about that. So they're going to be releasing a new series. And I think they put this on as a precursor to warm people up for it, because we went and we bought it on the Nickelodeon streaming service, and I was like, well, let's just watch it here, but don't worry, it'll be on Netflix because they're going to launch new things, so they'll surely bring this on beforehand. And they have, so we've been watching that, but I was like, what do they call it in, actually this was Korra, harmonic convergence, right?
Yeah,
that was Korra. And so I think that's really, maybe, instead of saying flow, I'm just going to say harmonic convergence
I like
from now
that.
on.
I like that. We can have a topic too on whether or not Korra or Aang is a better avatar on a different
No one
episode.
will agree with us.
No one will agree with
Fine,
us,
let's
but we
give
got some
people
solid...
the homework. Get out there if you have not watched Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's on Netflix. Everyone has Netflix if you have access to the internet, and if not, you have a friend. You need to watch it. So many life lessons. Like, I would say
both are amazing series.
Yep.
Like, there's no
so
bashing
much.
of either
Yeah, there's
one.
no bashing on either one. You're probably better off if you've got like youth age kids, like 6 to like 10. You're probably better off starting with. We should both start with Aang and like The Last Airbender, right? But that one is definitely the precursor, and then more preteen, teen, sort of like not adult topics. Yeah, some more adult
There's
topics.
definitely some more adult topics.
Is Korra, and the writing there, works better. But there's so many good lessons in there. We can all strive to relate to those characters. It's a wonderful series for people just to actually focus on life lessons and values and stuff.
It is.
So we're gonna leave that. That's your homework, right? Go watch some Nickelodeon anime, basically.
Yeah.
So before we start to wrap up, I
I don't
say,
want to
though,
cut you short. Colin's over here waving at me for time. I think we just get a clock over here and make
he's
an
not-
agreement.
He's told to wave at us for time.
Oh.
That's part of his job.
I don't know which the hand
He's-
signals are.
But this just
I'm a
means
quarterback that's
you're getting
lost.
close to the time. Don't let it rush you. Don't
Okay.
let it stress you out. He's just letting you know. He's just giving you data.
Just can't see
I know.
the clock.
Justin
Justin
he's
can
like
see the
he's
clock,
like
so
a
not
dog
worried.
where you put like the food in front of him and he's like, can I eat it now? Can I eat
Can
it
I
now?
eat it
Can I eat it now? Can I eat it now?
All right.
Anyways, so if you're getting back into training,
You've got time.
don't rush it. I think
Yeah.
is kind of the big thing here is like you have to come back at the same point, and it's super important to remember that regardless of whether you're coming back or you're actively training, all of the effort that you put in always has a delayed payout, right? It's your merchant account doesn't pay out for a week after you've received the pay. Okay, so you put in the effort, you make the money, you do the you put in the work. It doesn't come immediately.
It's not direct deposit.
And in fact, just recently, I had one of my clients on we were focused on the back squat, on like improving back squat total number and comfort around that, right? And he finishes that. At the end of it, near the end of it, we have a retest to see what his max is. He improves his max by a pretty significant margin, which I knew he was going to do. But here's the cool thing is he comes out of it and he's like, that was awesome. That was super cool. We move into another cycle. We have a little, like a bridge cycle that's like a week long. And then we move into another cycle that's focused on upper body pull strength. And halfway in, I have a stabilized day where he's doing a 3-rep max for back squat, right? And we're not testing the number. I was just like, hey, just get under something heavy based on how you're feeling that day. Whatever heavy is for you that day, that's all we're looking for. Increases his max on his back squat by the same margin of the first cycle. And there's almost 3 weeks between the last
That's
cycle
super
and
rare.
this, right?
Usually you have diminishing returns as you work through. Like, well, the gains
Yeah.
get harder. The gains get
the
harder.
gains get harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. And we knew the first one was like, I knew that was a gimme because he just hadn't done a cycle on back squat yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that was going to go up. But the second one is super cool and just goes to show you that like it takes time for those adaptations to catch up. So if you're training, even if you're training at 50%, you finish your sessions, you're like, I didn't really feel like I accomplished much, but I moved. Even if you do that for a long time, 2 weeks after you've taken a rest and you've done something else and you've moved on, you'll see the effects of those. So don't feel like I need to see results at the end of every session or a couple days after. I lift really heavy, I rest a couple of days, and then I should see an improvement on my jumps. You know what I mean? It doesn't work like that. It takes time, and you'll see the results later. In fact, most of the time it comes
At the end of like a deloading.
exactly.
Phase. Yeah.
So if you're getting back into parkour, take it slow. If you're currently into moving, it might actually help you to maybe hire a coach to do that on-ramping for you. Then you don't have to do any program. Sometimes that's nice.
Yeah. So let's talk about that real quick as we wrap things up. Let's take a moment to talk about the value of guidance coming back into something when you haven't been doing it for a while, and sort of making sure that you have the right expectations. You have somebody helping you see what you could do before and sort of how to get back into that. Because I think a lot of times we have kiddos or new athletes. We have new athletes who have very high expectations about what they're going to get in a very short amount of time, and they have multiple goals that are all worthy goals, but they're pretty big goals. Like someone coming like, oh, I want to learn how to do a lache, I want to learn how to do a backflip, and I want to learn how to do a cat to cat on the wall, and I expect to have 6 feet on that. And I have all these goals coming in as a new fresh learner, and I always look at that with excitement, but also look at it a little bit too with realism in that it's going to be hard to achieve all those things at once, right? So there's that mindset, and there's also the mindset of returning to things and expecting to get exactly what you had before. What do you do to shore things up early on, and make sure that you have some guidance through that process? And I think that having a coach for that, like you were saying, you had one of your clients who's like does one-on-one work with you, well, you were able to sort of help them temper those expectations and give them a process, sort of bring them back up to speed.
That's been a big learning curve for most of them, actually. I'm like, just do the work that I prescribe. Don't do extra. Because they'll finish the set and they'll be like, but I feel good. I want to do more. Don't do more. And we talked about this on the student thing. Just do what your coach tells you. You trust that your coach knows the process.
Trust the process.
Trust the process. Respect
the process.
I think it's super important. Sometimes if you're getting back into it and you don't know these things already, or you don't have kind of an idea, it's worth coming to an expert in the field and saying, hey, I'm on a break. I'm trying to get back into it. What do I need to do? And help me get that process. And then you can always look at what they're doing. If I hire Justin to do my on-ramp stuff, I can always look at what he's programming for me and ask him about it. Be like, why did you program this way? And he'll be like, oh, here's why, right? Like no respectable coach or self-respecting coach is gonna be like, no, I'm not gonna tell you the secrets of my way.
Right.
Like, but I hired you to do this for me.
Right.
So always, like, it's okay. Like, get it and ask why, and they'll explain it to you. And then now for next time, here's why. So
maybe not why in between every set.
Well, yeah, why is the weight increasing on this?
Yeah.
Maybe before the workout.
Yeah, before the workout. What's our goals? Why are we working? And that's a good thing too, because sometimes, like, even if your coach is competent, it can remind them that they do need a process, and there's some respect for that. And I think we've learned this a lot with some of our students coming back. One of the advantages, or the ways that we turned adversity into opportunity when it came to the Corona, essential slowdown of classes and whatnot, was coming back in, allowing students the opportunity to have some individual sessions to check in with where they're at, see what their goals are, and if they've been inactive for a while, bringing them back up to speed on skills that they're working towards. There's tremendous value in like having a few one-on-one sessions before getting back into like the full pace of what you were operating at before. You know, if you've been taking classes for 6 months or a year and then you stop for several months, it's really you're due a checkup to make sure that you get your skills back in a safe way. And it can be emotionally frustrating if you had something and then you were forced to sit at home, you know, with your brothers and sisters, or alone for, you know, or stay home from work and you don't even get the movement in of walking around in the office. You're at home for a period of time. Even just a few days of that or 2 weeks of that, if it's very sedentary, could be detrimental to the way that you move and can set you up for risk for both injury and then the psychological effect of not being able to perform anywhere near where you were. But most of strength is neurological, and that means that it is to some degree like riding a bicycle, where, you know, if you've been there once, that, you know,
it gets
the mapping's already there. You can get back to it much, much faster. Don't think you've lost stuff forever. And some of the best ways to do that is to tackle some one-on-one skills with a coach.
Yeah, well, just because they're going to be able to temper that speed for you, right? And they're going to be able to tweak things. If you need more time on something, they'll be able to focus on that. I mean, how many of our members coming out of the COVID slowdown, shutdown has like a negative connotation.
Well, we didn't shut down
stop,
completely. We reached out to people in other ways.
But like, how many of our members, Justin, did the lab sessions, which is what we call them now, and came back when we started doing group classes again, and were like, we really wanted to do group classes, but they loved doing the lab sessions. So how do we fold that back into our memberships, right? Because they saw the value of not only is the learning faster paced, but the connection between the coach and the student is just so much stronger when it's just the two of you.
Yeah, and because kids have a lot of other barriers to entry too. I think a lot of them were nervous to come back too. So getting that one-on-one, I think for both the coach and the student was a slower transition back to, you know, jumping in. But yeah, I think it's a good ramp up. And if we're talking about levels of efforts and getting yourself back in, you know, I really love the one-on-ones, and even the video reviews. If we had even a slower curve, it was like those video check-ins, the one-on-one small groups, and then group classes. That's a pretty good ramp, I think. Pretty good path back to, you know, your monkey ways. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we definitely have people swing in no time, and we put some new bars in, so that was also helpful. So I think that the clear path for someone who's really wants to get back into things, they first need to acknowledge that if they've been sedentary in any way, they need to sort of incrementally bring that back up, and then also to try and get some one-on-one time with a coach before jumping back in to where you were before, or just to be introduced to things and any changes, and then getting back into those group classes, and then deciding at that point, you know, do you want to continue to do some of those? Because what we've started to do now is offer for folks the ability to sort of do group classes and then have some regular one-on-one time with a coach. I think that's wise. And then there are some students who have just decided that's just the way they prefer to train. They're very independent, and they can do the work on their own. So they're very interested in that. So they do their training one-on-one exclusively. There are some that have just moved that direction, which is fine. Not everybody maybe wants to do that because there is community value in coaching and whatnot in a group. But knowing that that's an option and that you can grow from that too, and it's available.
It's a powerful tool. You don't have to use it all the time, but you should strongly consider, if you're coming back, leveraging that tool to accelerate that and prevent injury, right? And just generally enjoy the sport and movement more.
And then we've had some people come back who just, even on their onboarding sessions, were able to achieve things that they hadn't done before, but just that individual focus and time was all they needed to sort of get over a hump. So if they were blocked on a move in like a band challenge or some sort of goal that they had, they were able to, you know, really get past that in a few sessions, because that was maybe more of a mental barrier for them, not just coming back, but just like, oh, when I was here, this is what was holding me up, and getting the chance to go in and work on that with a coach was very good for them mentally.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think on that note, I think we're going to call it for today.
Yeah.
A lot of good info on there for you guys getting back into training, or for those of you that are training but maybe not training at the same capacity that you want, how to kind of ramp that intensity up or that focus. So
very good.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. We appreciate it, and we will see you next time.
Next episode.
Watch Avatar.
Bye.